Hey, welcome back, man.
What? Say again?
I said, welcome back.
I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, man.
Okay. Uh, so what the hell were we talking about last time?
I don't know, but we talked about so much stuff. I remember we talked about Barry White. We talked about Clam Fight.
Yeah,
Those guys rule, by the way.
they're also some of the coolest people ever.
Awesome. I'm gonna reach out to him. I listened to their whole discography maybe two or three times, and you were
Mhm.
spot on. Like the earlier stuff does sound like Neurosis, right on. But
Mhm.
they're just so diverse. Really enjoyed their stuff.
Yeah, they're really interesting dudes. I've known them since about 2007, um, when I was in a different band. And aside from being like just an amazing, like really good band, they're also just the nicest dudes. In my old band, we did a weekender with them and just like hung out and played shows. Um, and they're just like cool guys. They're good to hang out with. Their drummer Andy Martin is his name, is one of my favorite people in the world. He's just kind of a great touchstone, really good drummer, but also, and I'm not telling tales. He's an archaeologist, so it's not like he's like this big dummy. You know what I mean? Like he
Yeah.
plays like a caveman, but he also can like tell you what cave is from. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what bones he got out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
What a
I
cool
mean, they're all.
what a cool like profession to be too.
Oh yeah, and it's great because one of the things we've bonded over is like I have a huge interest in archaeology because when I was a kid I really loved archaeology and stuff. So we talk dinosaurs sometimes, which is super fun. We're talking about dinosaurs and like if I see something, I'll be like, as an archaeologist and you see a site, can you tell, you know, from looking at the site, this thing or that thing? And he always has an answer for me. Like he always knows, you know, he can always answer me about that. And tell me, like, oh yeah, you can definitely tell that there was a rammed earth structure here or whatever. And I'm like, it's so cool. Like it's so interesting. So yeah, he's a lovely guy, and his girlfriend is also an archaeologist. So it's great. Like they both have great stories about finding stuff, and then to add to it is like Andy's also the vocalist in Clam Fight, so he's playing drums and doing the vocals at the same time. So he writes lyrics about some of his archaeological experiences and stuff like that. They're a cool band, and I've seen them change over the years. They have another record coming out pretty soon, I hope. Um, they have a lot of moving, there's a lot of moving
Sure.
parts
Sure.
involved in getting a record out, but they have a new record that's even like it's even more like everything else that they've done, if that makes sense. It's like them plus,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like them doing the neurosis slash hate breed thing,
Yeah.
where there's like this ridiculously like heavy chunk parts that I can't begin to understand how they write it. And then on top of it, there's this real like atmospheric stuff that goes on. Sean, the one guitar player, is really, he's just really good at creating those things. Um, and they just and there's four of those guys, and they've all known each other since high school. So it's like it's seeing those guys all together is it's good to see. Do I get into this? Sure, why not? Um, there's this whole thing with like men in rock and roll and in men in general, right? Like we might have friends for like our entire lives, right? And spend tons of time with each other, but we never go like, "Hey, man, I love you," like for real. Like I
Yeah.
love you, you're my buddy, and I want the best things for you, and I love you. And one of the best things about those guys is they've all known each other so long, they've loved and hated each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they've been so fucking irritated with each other at times where they like, and now it's just kind of like an ongoing joke. Like you're like, oh, we don't talk about that. Like, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was a thing that happened one time and we all got so mad at each other. Now we don't refer to that situation ever again. Um, and, a lot of men would just like stop talking to a dude,
Yeah.
be like, oh, that after that happened, I'm not fucking with that guy anymore. These guys, it's like, yeah, we did it. We got, what are we going to do? Stop talking to each other? No, of course not.
Yeah.
Like they've been friends too long. They're not going to stop talking to each other, and like that's like the kinds of dudes I want to be around. Like,
For sure.
whenever I see Andy, which is funny because he's a little bit taller than I am. I'm like 6 foot. He's like maybe 6'1", 6'2", and he's
Okay.
a big dude with a beard, and he's got tattoos and all that junk. And I look like how I look like. And when we see each other publicly, we're like, rah, and then we grab
Yeah.
each other and we hug each other for an inappropriately long amount of time. Um, and I don't care if it's weird for other people, and it's not weird for me. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I
And
100% agree.
yeah, so those are the kinds of folks I like to spend my time with, and they're a really perfect example of good people playing good music. I wish nothing but the best things for those guys. Um, Fun fact, I do play on two of those records.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you listen to Mountain, it's on I think the second record.
Okay.
There's a dual guitar part at the end of the song that I got to do. That Sean asked me. Sean's the guitar player. He asked, "Did I want to take part in that song?" And once we sat down and started playing around with it, he was like, "Oh, I just want you to play a lead on this part." And I was like, "Okay, well, what comes after?" Because of course I was curious. He's like, "Oh, well, I'm not 100% sure." I'm like, "Why don't we throw phrases back and forth at each other and then harmonize at the end?" And he's like, "What does that sound like?" And we started fooling around with it. Next thing you know, that part that we came up with together in his basement, we ended up in the studio, like standing right next to each other playing that part.
That's awesome.
Uh, it really was like it was so much fun to do. I'm playing some theremin on one of their other songs, and that was funny too because like the way I play theremin is pretty haphazard, to say the best.
I think you told
And
me that last time.
yeah, so I'm playing like they were like, we want something at this part of the song. I was like, bad, I'll come up with something. And they bring it up the part, and I'm like, okay, I see what the part is. Let me just try something. So I make this like horrendous noise, and they stop the tape, and I'm like, I think you can actually on the recording, you can kind of hear me going, I don't think I'm going to do it again. Like you can kind of quietly, you know. And I was like, how was that? And like I walked into the control room and I was like, how was that? And Sean was like, well, you should have seen Andy 3 minutes ago. I'm like, what was he doing? He was like standing in the control room going like this,
Yeah.
you know? And yeah, it's like this big screaming note that I play in there. It's and of course because the space was there. Like it's not like I made it special. They made the space. I just put my on there, and made my thing with it. But yeah, I adore those guys. I love their music and I love them. So of course I
Yeah.
would absolutely recommend. And I'll tell you about more other bands if you want to. What do they call it? Offline. I'll send
Sure.
you a list of bands you should look into.
Sure.
So
I
that
have a running tally I keep. I have so many bands sending me stuff that like I just keep a running tally and I try to go through every day and listen to at least 5 or 8 of them. And then I write
that's
down notes.
awesome.
Yeah, like every review I do, like especially well, like you can see, like Magnasonic, I think. I've been listening to Little Wars, and then I was like, you know what? I like to listen to bands in chronological order just because I like to see how you guys, whether it's you or Metallica, I'd like to see how you evolved from, whether this artist left or this musician left and this one came in. I like to see how things evolved. So I went back and I was like, I'm not as familiar with Magnasonic. So as you could see, it was my album of the month last month. I don't know if you saw that picture, but like it's
Thank you.
such good shit, man, and it's so diverse and like if and this leads me back to what you were just saying about clam fight. Like if you try to like sit down and I think arrange things on paper about how things want to flow, and like if I was to look at it, like you would tell me about like bird sounds in your songs, I'm like, I don't know. Or a theremin, I'd be like, I don't know, that doesn't belong on a metal record. Like no way do
Right.
birds and metal belong together. But then you listen to
Sure.
it and it's so organic, like you would say, like by throwing the phrases back and forth at each other, it's so organic that sometimes like you can't plan out such beauty and perfectness or perfection, I should say. You can't blend
Right.
such like perfection and like plan that shit out on paper. So it's like it's such an organic feel while it's just so like it grabs you and just pulls you in too. And obviously, I'm not just kissing your ass because I like obviously have listened to enough of this stuff, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's funny that you say it's, how you describe it as being perfect in that respect, and like a lot of it is some of it, the idea is planned. Got it. I have a concept of a plan.
Sure.
My bad. I said it. I said a concept of a plan. My bad. I used a Trump quote just then. But
Oh, I don't know. I don't
well,
watch politics at all.
all right. That's just I'm embarrassing myself. But
It's okay.
anyway, so a lot of what we have there is like we go to record it and we're like, there's going to be something trippy here. You know what I mean? And like live we'll do a thing. But but a lot of it's in the moment, right?
Yeah.
And then you go to record. I'll give you a really good example. First song on Magnasonic, Qualified,
Okay.
and it has that really long middle section where it's all trippy.
Yeah.
When we went in uh, to like do the real tracking for that, we're like, well, we're going to do something trippy here, and we had like the bass line in there and the drum part, but the piano, the theremin, the the water phone, the
Yeah.
creepy noises. There's cymbals with chains on them being spun to get like that other texture. There's electric sitar in there. Um, there's really really quiet movie samples in there, like really really quiet.
Yeah. I would say I didn't hear this.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there. It's what we like. I like to call it like subliminal. So
Yeah.
it's like you hear like a sort of like a mumbling thing in the background, and you don't know what it is. Um, there's the sound of a broken amplifier in there. Um, we had this little tiny Fender amp. It's about yay big,
Yeah.
and we were putting the theremin through it, and it's a battery amplifier. So as the battery dies, it starts making terrible noises, but they're amazing.
Yeah.
Like it's like I remember because it started making these noises, and I looked at the engineer. I'm like, hit record right fucking now,
Yeah.
and get those noises. I was like that kind of shit, and I'm like,
Yeah.
we need all of those, please. We need all of those noises. Um, but yeah, like as it started developing is where it became concrete. You see what I'm saying?
Of course.
Like before then, before we got to that part, we were like, didn't really think we needed a piano there. But then as soon as we started adding the piano, we're like, of course we need the fucking piano. Like,
Yeah.
of course it needs all of those things. Um, it very similarly, the last song on Magnasonic, The Devil's Hat Band.
Okay.
That's a long one. It's like 11 minutes long, right?
Yeah.
Um, while we were recording it, we were like, this is a rocker. This is a rock and roll song all the way through. Rawr, you know what I mean? And it was just like all guitars and stuff, right? And then when we started um, getting the various parts of the song together, I'm like, the song's about barbed wire and how it ruined the cowboy life, right? So in the bridge, before it goes double time, you hear a what do you call a vibra slap? That thing that you used to hear. You hear it a lot of Western music. That thing,
Okay.
you'll hear it if you listen to it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a cowboy noise. It sounds like a rattlesnake tail, right?
Okay. Okay.
And
I
we
know.
were like, we
Oh, yeah.
clearly need, yeah. I'm like, in that part before it goes double time, we clearly need the vibra slap to make that noise because it's cowboys and shit. We need rattlesnakes. Let's go.
Yeah.
You know, um, I didn't know that until we recorded the basic tracks. I'm like, we definitely need the vibra slap there. You know, um, and then once we put it there, we're like, this is exactly what was needed there. You know what I mean? Um, we didn't think we were going to necessarily need um, this weird filtered. analog keyboard warping out towards the end. There's like some, textures with it's an old keyboard from the 70s. It's called a cat. And it's a bass synthesizer. It's analog. They're very unwieldy, but they're fine in the studio because you're in a controlled environment, but live they're a mess. But we didn't know we needed that in the song until we started trying it in the song. We're like, well, it's needed. You know what I mean? Like now I can't hear it without it, type of thing. So my point is like some parts of it are absolutely planning, right?
Right.
And then some parts of it are like you're trying stuff, and I I think that's like a big thing for us is giving ourselves permission to try things, right?
Right.
Um, and like I think I mentioned to you before, like to try things and and say to each other yes and you know like we need another texture there. Okay, like what do you think? And it's like I think maybe this, and then it's yeah maybe that, but like with this or and I'm like yeah all right, and then we like set up whatever it is that we think is going to get as close to making that sound that we're talking about as possible, whether it's a guitar or theremin, or if it's a banjo or melodica or any of those other various instruments that we have laying around into what pedal, and that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
um does it go forward, does it go backwards, do we cut it up, do we what I mean, like all these things.
Yeah.
And so like these are all things that we take into account, but the whole point is not to be afraid to do that, right?
But I
Like
think
I think
you have to take that gamble because if you don't take that without risk, there's no reward.
absolutely, absolutely. And well, I mean, the other thing is like, I think a lot of, especially in rock and metal, I feel like a lot of musicians and a lot of bands are worried. Like, I think we've talked about this before. They're concerned about their brand, right?
Yeah.
Or like they have a theory about what's rock and roll or what's metal and what's not metal,
Sure.
right? And it's like, I mean, I get that because and I think like I think to another point we made before is, there's bands that are like another one of those bands, and then there's the bands that are innovators, right? Who like take a genre and then kind of fuck with it. And then there's other people who are just really good at the genre that they play, and it's absolutely nothing wrong with being either version of that thing.
Sure.
And I've certainly been in bands where I was like, there's no fucking way we're getting a piano in this. Get fucked. We're not putting a piano on here, or no, we're not doing any extra vocals. It was very straightforward and stripped down, and it was, and those were good rock bands. Those were good, stoner sludge rock bands or whatever. Um, but I find myself happier when I can do more shit and like play around with it.
Yeah. I was listening to Death
It's just
yesterday.
more interesting to me.
I was listening to Chuck
Uh
Schuldiner
huh.
Death yesterday, all from the very first album, Scream Bloody Gore, to Last Perseverance, or The Sound of Perseverance. And I noticed, like, in the very beginning, Chuck Schuldiner had I'm just going to sing about torture, bodies being mutilated, blood, guts, gore. I actually liked it as the albums progressed, and he started talking about things that are not metal, like emotions and feelings and life situations, and it's like when you took your brand of brutal, gory death metal and you made it and you stepped away from your brand, like I thought that growth is what excites me, and I think that's why your album, I guess I would classify it as like stoner doom, but like it really doesn't fit into either one of those categories because it has moments of sludge, moments of country with, the cowboy sounds. And I think because you guys are willing to step outside of like such hard, rigorous boundaries, that I feel that allows your albums to have more of a sonic size to them.
Yeah, that's precisely why we do it. Um, you know, and I feel like most of the bands that we all forgot we liked, but we really like.
Yeah.
That's what they do. I mean, you forget now because you've listened to Led Zeppelin for a very long time, right? Like, not you particularly, but
Right.
one who likes rock or whatever.
Sure.
You've been hearing Led Zeppelin for a long time. I know I've been hearing it since I was a teenager, and you kind of like lose sight of the fact that this was revolutionary shit at its time. You
Yeah.
know, they, you know, or even as a better example, Hendrix, right? Like people die to sound like that vintage Hendrix sound, right?
Yeah.
But like you realize that was not vintage when he recorded it.
It was
That
like,
was cutting edge. He was using,
yeah.
the latest studio technology, the latest gear, and all that stuff. And people are still obsessed with trying to sound like Hendrix. And that's a fine thing to do. But keep in mind that if he stayed alive, he would have stayed on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He would have stayed looking for new sounds. I mean, as it is, you can listen. I wouldn't say I'm a Hendrix scholar, but I know a lot, almost all of his shit. And like when you listen to something like 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be, which is on the Electric Ladyland album, there's like squeaks and squonks and flutes and bass with delay on it and all kinds of freaky shit.
Yeah.
That was no one was doing anything like that at the time. You know what I mean? Or you can even take something. What is it? I think it might be the second to last song on it. The Burning of the Midnight Lamp.
Yeah.
It's got a harpsichord on it,
Yep.
and it doesn't sound like the Beatles. It sounds like something else. It's just amazing and trippy and
Yeah.
sonically very interesting. You know, but like people forget because this stuff is so ingrained in our minds for having heard it for so long, at least for somebody like me. But that's when you realize like these guys weren't just like we're doing a straight guitar rock band record. No, they were like really going for it. They were really trying to to get some sounds out there that you don't hear normally, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't hear in other rock and roll records. And like that always appealed to me, trying something different, trying something new, you know, what does this thing do? And you pick it up and you start dorking around with it. Oh, is this musical? Is it not musical? It can be if you fool around with it. I
Yeah.
think that's, you just have to try stuff. And, and that goes for every part of it, right? You try stuff with the arrangement. Who says you have to have a verse and then a chorus and then a verse and then a chorus and then a bridge? And yeah, that's a way to go. I mean, it's tried and true, right? Nirvana did it very well,
Yeah.
and their song structures weren't complicated. They were just really fucking good, you
Yeah.
know. Um, but there's nothing that says you can't just go from a very linear song where it's like here's this part, then here's this part, and then there's this part. I mean, and none of them are really related to each other except for the fact that they all go together. Like they flow. You know, if you take Celestial Tides off of Little Wars, right, the instrumental,
Yeah.
um, it's those parts don't repeat.
Well,
They just go one into the other into the other. It's completely linear, right? It's like we have this trippy intro, and then there's a keyboard interlude, and then the drums start, and then a different part starts, and then that part goes into a different part, and then after that part uh, is a whole other thing, and it hangs together because you find a way to make it hang. You know what I
but it
mean?
never circles back around either.
The only thing it does, which I think is funny and fun, is at the very end of the song, we play part of the opening riff, like just for funsies, because it felt like a good way to put the cap back on the magic genie bottle, so to speak.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it another 100 times.
Well, yeah, it's just the parts don't repeat, and you can keep doing that. You could write an entire record. It's like I said, it's very linear, and you can start out here with something that's straight up doomy, and then wind up over here with harmonica and acoustic guitar. Who's to say you can't?
I think you do a great job, and I don't remember the album opener on Little
Mm-hmm.
Wars. I'm not good with track names. I'm track one, track two.
Pony Express.
Pony Express. When it gets to the part where it opens up into atmospherics, man, that's just like such a huge moment. And I think that really hammers home your point of like, it starts off kind of like low to the ground, it seems. And it seems like right at that point where I think I looked it up last time I was listening to it this weekend. And I want to say it's at like the minute 40 mark. And it
Mm-hmm.
breaks off into like, it reminds me of just cresting the horizon and just opening up into a
Yeah.
big, expansive, airy, like vast view. And like it's just such a great that feeling. Like a lot of I always chase feelings in songs, like where you get the goosebumps on your arms or something. And that expansive feeling is like the tail of the dragon I've been chasing for years. Like once you climb that hill and you see that vast open majestic, you're like, fuck yeah, this is where I need to be. And that song
Yes.
really hammers that point at the minute 40 mark.
Yeah, it's like I guess that's where like the ladies are all singing, and then
Yeah.
there's the tambourine is in there,
Yep.
and yeah, when that happens, all of a sudden it's like okay, this did not start out this way, but here we are, you
And you
know.
can see the journey and like you're getting to like, holy fuck, like I got out of the mud. Like I'm just,
Yeah,
it's awesome. Like it's
yeah.
just an awesome feeling.
Well, thank you. I mean, and that's that in that respect, that was intentional. We wanted it to like, that's why we waited to get the ladies doing the harmonies in the background, and we waited with the tambourine. Like, you section it out into chunks, right? And it's like, okay, building, building, add another thing here, building, building, add another thing here. Next thing you know, you've added all the ingredients to the stew, and you're just, you're getting all the flavors at once.
Yeah.
Um, but if you start out getting all the flavors at once off the top, then where do you go? It's like Spinal Tap, right? All these blokes running around on 10, and then where they go from there? Nowhere. Well, we've got that one more. We can go, that's that little extra. But it's true.
Right.
If you start out with like bombarded with all the flavors, it's hard to make it out. It's hard to
Yeah.
understand what all you're getting, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's why good meals start out with an appetizer, right? And
Yeah.
you drink some water, or you have a little, what do you call it? Um, you have a, what do you call it? A palate cleanser, right?
Yeah.
Like when you get a really good meal, there's levels to it, right? Like you don't just like, that's the difference between like eating McDonald's and eating it in fine dining. McDonald's, you pick up a Big Mac, one bite. That's what you're getting the whole time, buddy. You're getting Big Mac straight through. A good meal, you get this plate, and there's like layers of flavor, and there's sides and things that you can try. Of course, this is a common effect I would make, but trust me, like enjoying a good meal is the same to me as listening to music that you like. You know, that's why I get pretty discouraged by a lot of bands, because it's like if they come at you like this, that's how they're always coming at you.
Yeah.
You know, and if the trick is a good trick, if they're a one trick pony, but the pony's trick is really good, I'm not mad at that. You know what I mean? What bothers me, I think, in my opinion, when you like come at somebody and that's really all you have, and the trick isn't that good, like it's not that interesting to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm bored after two or three songs. Like I don't like if I can tell that the rest of the songs, I'll audition them and see like I listen to the first minute or so of the song, and generally speaking, unless I'm going to be incredibly surprised, they're going to keep coming at you the same way all the way through the song. And it's cool if the trick is good, but like I said, a lot of times it's not.
Right.
You know, a lot of times that trick is like, yeah, good bit, bro, but like I'm bored now. Like, you know, I mean, and I like when you were talking about, you're a big fan of Exodus, right?
Yeah.
When you want to hear, when you want to hear fucking brutal, awesome, murderous, fucking pummeling riffs, you can put on an Exodus record, put the needle down on the first track, and go all the way to the last track, and you're satisfied.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they're really good at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I don't fault them because, like I said, they're good at it. my biggest thing is like, if you're going to only have one way of coming at me, you better be really good at it. Otherwise, I'm going to
Agreed.
get bored and split. And who cares what I like? It doesn't matter what I. It's just how I feel about like listening to things. So I get bored with one dimensional shit. And that's why I don't want to do it myself.
Sure. But I
You know,
think too, like you're mentioning with the one dimensional shit, like a lot of bands go in the studio and everything is perfect. Like by the time that album is released, it's so scrubbed, it sounds almost sterile. I know Exodus isn't a good one to pick, and I don't know who I would pick to as a example. But when you get that final product, you almost sound like AI could have made this. Every every drum stick beat. I don't know what you call drums, but
yeah.
anyway,
Every drum hit is yeah.
yeah, and the notes are extremely perfect, and like yours has so much in there, so much variation that even I don't. But let's just say, like I don't know, song six sucked. I could just move on to song seven, and when your album, it's going to be a completely different track, feel, emotion. Whereas in Exodus, if I hate track six, I'm probably going to hate tracks 1 through 12 too. So
Right. Yeah. Well, and so that's the fine line, right? That you want a record that sounds good, right? You want it to
yeah,
sound like you want it to be as close to your vision as possible, right?
yeah,
You want that to happen. And so technically, you can make a record perfect. Like
sure.
you can make it so that there's nothing on there that isn't exactly in time, in tune, etc. Like it's possible, Um, when we were going to do the mix of the record at Retro City Studios, which is a great studio, and we were mixing with this guy. His name's Joe Baldazar. Super guy, great engineer, and also just a sweet man. I really enjoy his company. Super fun and funny, and fun to hang out with, and fun to make a record with. Um, and we were mixing with him, and I was pre gaming. Before we were doing a little conversation before we came in to do the mix, and I was like, yeah, I want it clean, but it's I'm not looking for perfection. I want it to say what we want it to say. He's like, you don't want it to sound like Nickelback. And I was like, and I actually took him seriously. And I was like, if it makes the songs the best way that they're supposed to be, then yeah, sure. I don't care if it sounds like Nickelback. And he's like, that's the most mature thing I've ever heard a guy from a band ever say. And I'm
Yeah,
like, I want the songs to have what they deserve.
sure.
And like, if this is we haven't written a super polished radio pop rock song that I know of. We haven't written one, but if we did, who could you think of that does super polished radio pop songs better than Nickelback? They do it.
Yeah.
I don't really like it. It's not my thing, but I can also recognize that if a song is supposed to sound like that, you got to give it to it.
But
You got to give this.
you did cover the Osmonds and Barry White. They're super polished.
Yeah, we kind of took our own swing at it. You
Right,
know,
right.
yeah, our version of that Barry White song is certainly more psych than it is soul.
Yeah.
It's and part of it's a good part of it is just because I'm not Barry White. I'm never going to sing it that way. Like I'm going to do my best and sing it how I sing it, but I'm not a fucking super baritone like Barry White was, and we're not the same band, and we don't have a string section, and so we did our own thing with it. We added our own flavors to it. Some things are very true to the original, and some things are really just us. And that it's not a perfect recording by anybody's standards. Like the beat wavers. If you're like listening for that kind of shit,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's not in perfect time. My vocals most certainly are not in perfect tune, nor are they in the same range as Barry. Um, but it is what it is. Like,
And it
there's
works.
certain things, yes, and there's certain things you just kind of have to like. Uh, you got to give yourself license to be you. Otherwise, and doing a perfect cover of something that has no appeal to me. Because why would you want to hear me try to do this to sound like the original? If you want to hear that, listen to the original.
Right.
You know, because it's already there and it was done by the guy who had the vision. You know, this is my interpretation of that, and I'm doing, my thing with it. And if you want to see what it sounds like when I try to do my thing with this, classic great song, then I'm happy to provide it to you. But if you want a note for note perfect interpretation of it that sounds just like the original, I don't actually see the point in doing that.
No, I agree.
You
And
know,
I hate when
I
bands
don't,
do that.
there's that, and then there's also, our bass player Josh. I don't remember who it was, so I can't tell you what band it was, but they did this like really stupid cover of, I don't remember, some pop song, like some like older pop rock song,
Sure.
and it's like the typical thing that people always do, which is like, oh, they're never going to see this coming, and they like made it real loud and heavy, and I was like, it's the same fucking song, you just played it loud. Like, you didn't do anything interesting with it, you just played it loud, like you put heavy guitars in it. That's not exciting to me. Like,
Right.
do you remember there was a Kiss tribute album call out? This is
Yeah.
several years.
I don't
It had a
remember.
lot of
Kiss
people.
my ass.
Yeah, yeah, and there was a lot of people, and I think they even got God, I can't remember his name.
My
They got a
favorites
country
were on
guy.
there. My Mighty Mighty
Huh?
Boss Tones. They were on there.
Yeah, they did Detroit Rock City,
Yep.
and that was really cool with the horns, right?
Yeah.
There's my point. But there's a track on there, and I forget who was in the band, but it was like, I think it was Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, and I think Maynard from Tool, and they did a cover of Doctor Love.
Okay.
Their version of it is not at all like the original, and I absolutely love it. Um, for that reason, it's like jagged and fucked up, and the vocals completely distorted and hard to understand. But
I haven't
he's
li-
like,
I've been listening to that since I was like 16. As soon as we hang up, I'm throwing it on.
in my opinion, it's really good because it's not satisfying. Like the original is like a straight up 70s anthemic rocker, right?
Yeah.
And it's great. It's got the Gene Simmons vocal on it. It's great. Um, and this version, I forget what they're called. Like, they gave themselves like a bullshit like one-off name for this, but it's on the Kiss tribute record. Um, and for my money, that's the most interesting thing on the record. It's it's uncomfortable because it's supposed to be Dr. Love, and then it doesn't sound anything like Dr. Love at all. To me, that's how you do it. That's super interesting. Like, that's it's challenging.
They called themselves
Um,
Shandy's Addiction.
yeah, there you go. I don't know who knows who's in that band, but that one's, to me, that's, you listen to that and you're like, that's how you do a cover, man. That's
Yeah.
how it's done. Um,
I hate to
and
cut this short again, Eric,
yeah,
but
that's okay.
we're less than a minute, dude. So
Okay.
I don't have time to do another one tonight, but I want you, in case we get cut off, I want you to mention your record release party on October 9th and how everybody should check it out in Philadelphia and the surrounding
Uh,
tri-state area.
I'll do that right now. Um, I'll give you like a whole thing with a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Hi, this is Erik from Thunderbird Divine, and you're listening to and watching the Metal Institute of Thrashology. And I personally would love to invite you to our record release party here in Philadelphia at Fat Lady Brewing in Manayunk. It'll be us and Cthulhu Martini, and DJ Slow Movements. It's October 19th. Come see the show.